afternoon. Thank you so much for tuning in to Hashtag No Limits. Hashtag No Limits is about people whose society has placed limits upon, but who have busted through those limits. Ophelia says in Hamlet, we know who we are, but not who we will be. And I believe that to be 100% true. And I believe there is no better example of that than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The caterpillar literally dissolves into its cells and then reforms into the butterfly. As if that wasn't difficult enough, it then isn't finished struggling. It has to struggle in order for its wings to be strong enough to fly. Has to struggle to get out of the cocoon. I didn't say that right. It has to be strong enough to get out of the cocoon in order for its wings to be strong enough to fly. And again, that is no easy task. My guest today, Amrutha, has had similar struggles. And I just met her a few weeks ago. She actually reached out to me, and she's doing some research for some special education stuff, and she was wanting my opinion. So I was very humbled that she had asked for that. And then in talking with her, I thought, she would be a great guest. So I am your host, Shelly Kino, and please make sure that you like this, you subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel. If you're watching live, you give us a hashtag live. If you're watching in the replay, you give us a hashtag replay. I think I've covered all of the business stuff and all of the technical stuff. So, Amrutha, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely. You have been, I just have to tell the audience, she has been one of the sweetest people to correspond with. She's been so respectful in her emails and the time that we talked before. And she's just so polite. And I've never met her in person, but Amrutha, I just wanted to let you know that I so much appreciate the respect and the considerations that you include in your emails and in the times that we have spoken in person or virtually, I guess, not in person, but
Thanks. Thank you so much for your kind words. Even though this is only the second time we're speaking virtually, it feels like we've known each other for so long.
Yeah, I would agree to that. Absolutely, for sure. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
My name is Amrutha, and I am currently a third-year student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, UNC, and I am double majoring in public policy and education and minoring in conflict management.
Oh my. That's a lot.
It tends to be a mouthful.
So did you want to keep going on yourself a little bit, or you want me to go?
Sure. I just wanted to add that I'm very passionate about special needs advocacy as a person with physical limitations, and I'm very excited to continue my advocacy around this.
Yeah, and the degrees that you're getting, I mean, the public policy, education, and conflict management, I mean, all of those things can result in advocacy in all different levels and stages. And so good luck to you in all of that. And I imagine now that you're in your third year, you're really getting into the courses that are the really meat of that. Usually the first couple of years are just the general types of things, but third and fourth year is usually when we start to get to that stuff we really enjoy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me, did you grow up there in North Carolina, or what brought you to Chapel Hill?
Yeah, I've been in North Carolina my whole life. I was born in Plano, but we moved here when I was 6 months old.
Oh.
I'm pretty much a North Carolina native, so
Yeah.
and I've been going to UNC my whole life for my medical needs, and I just loved how kind and inclusive UNC was. So that's one of the reasons I decided to continue at UNC, and to this day I continue to be amazed by how kind and inclusive everyone is at UNC.
That is so awesome to hear. I don't hear that all over the country, and to hear it from UNC, and hopefully there are other universities that I just haven't heard it about, but I'm glad to know that there's at least one that is a very inclusive environment for all people, and that gives me hope, and I hope that any of the listeners who have a child who isn't at college age yet will have that hope as well, because there are so many things that someone with a difference can do when given the opportunities. What are some sort of things that maybe you either were directly told or that you just felt people didn't expect that you would be able to achieve that you have achieved so far?
I mean, this whole aspect of going to college is tremendous for me. And additionally, of all the colleges, I personally never expected being able to go to UNC, which has been my dream all along. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that in terms of academics, I've had to overcome a lot of hurdles to get to where I am today, and I'm just so thankful for all my teachers and professors and family and friends who have supported me all along, and I owe where I am today to them.
Oh, that's very kind. So you mentioned teachers, and I'm a former special education teacher. I still do some subbing here in the state of Illinois. And in my book that I have written, Those That Can't Teach, a lot of the students that went through the school systems needing special education didn't always get a lot of support from some of their teachers. But you mentioned that you had a lot of teachers. So I'm very encouraged by that, first of all. Would you say, though, that it was all of your teachers, or were there those unfortunate ones that were not as supportive?
I'm sure there were a few. I think more than not being supportive, sometimes I felt like there was a lag in communication of maybe what I was trying to explain and how others perceived it. Mm-hmm. I think once most of my teachers were very willing to listen and learn from what I was experiencing. So I think that those who have an open mind really help students with differences, and I'm so thankful to those who just listened and went from there.
Yeah, that's such a key thing is just listening. It's such an important aspect of life that I don't know if it's because we are in such a crazy busy society now, or because there's so many expectations placed on teachers, and I can really only speak about from teachers because that's my chosen career field, but I know this happens in other places and other employers, and so I'm not picking on teachers, but I kind of am because that's where my experience is. So I wonder if it's the time constraint of everything that maybe precludes some teachers from feeling like they have the time to listen and learn and change. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's definitely true. And I will add that listening is a very complex phenomena. I mean, like, it goes beyond just hearing something. And I think that we don't put enough emphasis on teaching people how to listen, because as I learned in one of my conflict management classes last year, there is actually a very methodical way to go about it. So it's called active listening. And what you do is you just first you let the other person speak, then you rephrase what they said in your own words to see if they understand. And then you ask follow-up questions that are how and what questions, or asking them if they can explain something to learn more. And the reason I didn't say why is because why kind of forces the person to use their logic. But if you want to learn more about the emotions, what and how questions are a great way to learn more. And I think that if we just emphasize teaching active listening, so much of this world would be different.
Oh, I love that. So let me see if I have done this correctly as far as active listening. So, what I think I heard you say is that the world would be better off if we taught the active listening skills, and that it's better to ask how and what questions instead of why questions, and that there are steps. It is a very methodical way to listen. And I think you mentioned 3, that you let the other person speak, then you rephrase what that person said, and then you follow that up with those how and what questions. Did I get the gist of it?
You're already a pro.
Well, I have to admit, I have learned that strategy before, so I can't just like say that I automatically picked it up that quickly. But I would like to say that you were a good teacher because you did line it out very, very nicely. So take Amrutha's lesson there, anybody that's listening, and learn how to actively listen, because I do, it is such a key component to connection with a person, is to know that how and that what. And the thing you said about the why and how that brings in a person's logic, but the how and the what bring in more of the emotions. That part I don't think I'd ever heard before. And I find that to be true, because we don't connect with people over logic. We connect with people because of emotions. And so that's a really good point to ponder. And yeah, if we took the time to listen to our neighbor or our spouse or our students, we would have a clearer line to understand them versus going into the conversation or listening, thinking how to reply, which is, I think, what most people do.
Precisely.
Cool. I could go to UNC and get a degree. So that was in your conflict management that you learned that, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Being a teacher, working with students who had a lot of different behaviors that were unwanted behaviors, being married for almost 30 years, I've learned a thing or two about conflict and how to manage it. I don't know that you could, I guess you can spend a whole 2 years learning on, I guess there's lots and lots of strategies involved with that. And especially if you're going into advocacy. So what other tools do you use as far as advocating? Because I'm sure you've had to advocate for yourself before taking these conflict management courses. So what sort of things did you do that you hope to pass along maybe to some of our viewers?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is it's so important to see the best in others. Like when you acknowledge that someone may want to help, but they just may not be aware, and that's why you're having a lag in communication, then it makes everything so much more clear, and we can actually take the time to say, hey, I know you want to help, and thank you for embarking with me on this journey. Here's what I think. What do you think? And I really think that approaching any type of advocacy from a place of love and seeing the best in everyone is so essential to making progress.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the whole saying, love makes the world go round. It's not been a long time saying for no reason. And yeah, again, that goes back to that connection that we talked about, learning that how and that why, I mean, the how and the what of why someone is feeling the way that they're feeling or saying what they're saying, and being able to understand them a little bit better, because we all come from a different perspective. We can be at the same event, we can be having the same experience, but our perspective of what we were before that experience or that event is very different. And I drive my husband crazy because when he comes to a decision, I ask him, well, how did you come to that? What made you come to that? And I think, but maybe I do say, why did you decide that? And I'm going to have to change that. But I like to have all that information, because if he has decided differently than I have about something, or he has an opinion that is different than I have about something, I like to know all of that sort of background and that different perspective information. But for him, he's like, I've made the decision. I've thought it all out. I've done all the stuff. Why can't you just accept my decision? Or why are you trying to change me? And I'm like, I'm not trying to change. I want to understand. And I want to try to see it from his perspective. So yeah, that is something that I've tried to do with everyone that I have ever interacted with, is to try to see things through their eyes, because I have a very, very minuscule view of the world, just like you have a very, very minuscule view of the world. But if we can each share our views, then our world has just exponentially grown.
I love how you phrase that.
Well, thank you. It just came to me. So if you don't mind sharing, like what are some, or maybe you don't even need any, if you get any sort of accommodations or helps at the college level, because I know I've heard people tell me that before, when we've talked about accommodations and modifications in writing an IEP, well, they're not going to get these in college. So have you gotten any, or even if you haven't gotten, since you're going into advocacy, maybe you can explain what someone would have to do to possibly get some of those helps in college?
Sure. So I currently get extended time, and also I get priority registration because on the day when everyone's registering, it could be hard to get into classes that you want because everyone is just so fast,
Right.
So priority registration really helps. And then I get notes from professors and I get a variety of other accommodations that I'm willing to talk about, but here are a few. And the way I got these is by talking to the Accessibility Resources Office at UNC. And I will say that when you first explain some of your needs, people may not understand you right away, but I've always learned that just being honest and vulnerable about why you need certain things, it is really what helps get these accommodations. And I've also found that appealing to your professor on a personal level can be a lot more effective than going through a third party, because if you make that connection and show the professor that you care and show the professor why you need something, 99.99% of the time, they will be more than willing to help you in any way.
Well, that's good to hear. And I'm glad that your experience has been positive. And also, did you most of the time, like I said, when we're talking about an IEP, that's an individualized education program for anyone who doesn't know. Did you actually, I didn't even ask you this, did you have one going through school?
I did have one, yeah.
Okay. But my understanding, and again, it may be, different colleges offer different things. But my understanding is even if a person didn't have an IEP or something that garnered them accommodations in high school, they could still go to that. Did you call it an accessibilities office?
Yeah.
They could still go to that office or whatever it might be called on their campus and talk to them and say, I've struggled with this or that. And so I want to make sure that that's very clear to anyone who's watching, that those offices are there on college campuses for the sole purpose of helping the student. And so reach out, find those resources at your high school level, of course, it's kind of built in for you and people will approach you. But at the college level, you have to reach out. And I really appreciate too what you said about reaching out to the professor one-on-one, because professors are, I don't want to say that they're busier. What am I trying to say? That they have less opportunity to get to know the students than in the high school or the grade school years. And so, you literally are just popping into their class 1 or 2 hours a week, and then you're out. And so they don't know you, and they don't know if you really do need that accommodation or not. But if you, like you said, you go and you talk to them personally, then you can explain. And I just think that is awesome. And I think most professors that I've ever met have office hours, and they're willing to, all educators go into education because we want to help. We want to teach the next generation. So I've not really met anybody that's been absolutely no way, don't come talk to me, or no, I'm not making any changes for you, or that sort of thing. So that's good, especially at the college level, because it is a much more independent type of environment for you.
And I will add, I personally didn't do this, but if you trust a professor or someone, you can ask them to even tag along to a meeting with the Accessibility Resource Office. And that could help too.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion that I hadn't heard of or thought of before. That's wonderful. So when you reached out to me, it was for some research that you were working on. But I know you've done some research in the past about educating people about disabilities and how to talk to someone. So would you share some of that information with us?
Sure. So last semester, I did a survey with a group of middle schoolers and high schoolers to gauge what they had learned in elementary school about accessibility differences and how they think we should go about educating students about these topics. And it was a very insightful survey. Firstly, I learned that the majority didn't learn about accessibility differences in elementary school, and even fewer learned about mental disabilities as compared to physical limitations. And however, this made me very happy. Most of the people I surveyed, actually 100% of them, wanted to learn more about accessibility differences and how to be a good ally. And some of the recommendations they gave were introducing books and videos and other means of education into everyday subjects such as social studies and language arts and others, just to normalize the topic. Mm-hmm. And also, they also wanted people with accessibility differences to come in and talk about their experiences. And many wanted to have more interactions with their peers in special ed classrooms.
That is very encouraging, and I'm very excited to hear that that they are wanting that information. And unfortunately, it was no surprise to me at all that the results showed that there had been very little education at the elementary grades for accessibility differences. And I've noticed that in our conversations that I say disabilities and you say accessibility differences. So I want to put a pin in that, and I want to talk about that in just a minute. So hold on to that. But going back to the topic of your survey last semester, it has become clearer and clearer to me over the last 4 or 5 years how much time is spent on working with the child who has the accessibility differences to function, behave, I'm not really sure how you want to describe that, in with the population that are, I don't know, how do you refer to what I would say is the general population?
People without accessibility differences.
Okay. That's where I was thinking it was going to go, but I wasn't sure. So we spend so much time in one segment and we don't talk to the other segment. And it really does need to be that, we need to talk to those who don't have accessibility differences just as much as we talk to those who do have accessibility differences in order to make the most cohesive, inclusive environment possible. But for some reason, I don't know if it's that it just hasn't been presented often enough to teachers or administrators or whoever, policymakers, that it needs to be both directions. What do you have any thoughts on that? Was that part of the survey at all?
That pretty much encapsulates what I learned. Really involving all actors in this discussion is so important. And starting young is a great idea because children are so open to learning and to change. And I think we really have to seize the moment and give them the tools to be an inclusive peer.
Yeah. And, children are learning at a young age the opposite only because they're not directly taught to be inclusive. We as adults exclude so often a child with accessibility differences by sending them out to a speech class or sending them to a special education or sending them to occupational therapy or physical therapy. And even when we bring those therapists in or we bring in the special education teacher, because we don't talk about it, that sends the signal that we aren't supposed to talk about it. And it's something different and maybe wrong, or it's maybe not wrong, but it's just not one of those things that we talk about. And I think that's awesome. What you just said is that, at that young age, they're already learning and they're so willing to learn that, yes, let's teach them and normalize it and teach them a positive way. Because I think that's kind of what happened to me growing up. Is when I was growing up, the special education law was just starting to come into effect as I was starting my early years of school. And I didn't see anybody in my building that had special needs. it was only until I was probably 12 or 13 that I finally realized there was even a classroom in this large building where I attended elementary school, that the students who learned differently were in that classroom, but they never came to lunch. They never came to my PE class. They didn't go to recess with us. And so I think that's where my sort of cognitive bias developed, was like, oh, well, they're over there. I must not be able to, I wouldn't have anything in common with them, or I wouldn't be able to interact with them because the adults have decided for me that I can't. So I think as a policymaker, when you go into that, that you, I hope that you'll be able to change some of that. And I know a lot of that has been changing with the inclusion movement and the full inclusion movement. But it is definitely still has a long, long way to go.
Most certainly.
So in your experience growing up, did you spend most of your time in a gen ed classroom or in a special ed classroom?
I spent most of my time in a general ed classroom growing up. I think that in kindergarten I spent a bit of the day in a special ed kindergarten class, but I spent most of my time in general ed.
Good. As it sounds like you should have, because you obviously were academically capable of doing everything that your peers were doing, or otherwise you probably wouldn't be a junior at UNC Chapel Hill right now. So I'm very happy that your school recognized that, because unfortunately, hearing you speak, is not, your speech is not the same as my speech. How you've moved a couple of times. Your movements are not like my movements. Your mobility, I believe you told me, is affected as well. And so oftentimes when somebody sees all of those physical things, they assume that the brain and its ability to learn has also been affected. And so I'm very thankful that your school recognized in you that that was not the case. I presume that probably had as much to do with you as maybe your parents.
Definitely. My parents have been my biggest advocates all along. And also, I think that over time, my teachers also saw that I might talk a little differently and do things a little differently, but I can learn whatever people in other classrooms are learning if I'm just given the time and the patience to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to touch on, again, that you refer to yourself as accessibility different. So where did that term come from, and why do you use that versus any of the other terms that are out there?
Sure. I think I saw that a lot of people in the community were getting kind of jumbled between disability, which I personally don't love that term, which I don't see is very common. So that word versus special needs versus differently abled and so many other terms. So that's why I said, well, the word accessibility different kind of encapsulates all the sentiments. So what it means to me is, let's kind of break down the word accessibility. So it's access and ability. So the way I access my abilities may be different, but it's the same ability as anyone else.
That's awesome. Yeah, I try to be respectful of because I am not in that community, and so trying to figure out what is the right terminology, because I never want to offend anyone. But even in writing my book, I did use the term special needs. The sort of the subtitle, I guess, is True Stories of Special Needs Families to Promote Acceptance, Inclusion, and Empathy. And I struggled with how I should call the families in my book. And all the families were fine with the term special needs. And I thought that was a very accepted term. And I'm finding out that a lot of people don't like that term. They would prefer disability, which I'm more thinking along the lines of you in breaking down words. And so dis means not or can't, and then you have ability. So I thought, well, that, to me, I wouldn't want that word used. But then I was, hearing so many populations were saying, no, we want disability. And so then I met you, and you say accessibility difference. And I like that. I mean, I absolutely like what you're saying, accessibility differences, because it is. I mean, I almost think that's one that you could give to everybody, because I'm going to access my ability different than you are. So based on your definition, I think it could be applied everywhere.
Thank you so much for the affirmation. I've gone into so many spaces that where one particular word seems to be the only way that people can identify. And there's so much emphasis on fitting people into boxes. Like, you have to like the word disabled because that's your identity. But my belief is every identity is a self-constructed thing. Mm-hmm. So you can use whatever words you want. You don't have to try to convince yourself that one way is the right way.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of why I stuck with the special needs on the title of my book, because I thought about it, I prayed about it, and what we are accepting of today might not be accepting 10 or 20 years from today. And I'm hoping my book is still around and still being read and still, being picked up for the very first time in 10 or 20 years. And I thought, I can't see the future. I don't know what's going to be appropriate or accepted at that time. And so I'm just going to go with this for now. And, it will be what it will be. So thank you for explaining that. We have a little bit of time left if you're still good to keep talking, or if you're good. Okay. I didn't know if you had classes this afternoon that you needed to get to before a certain time. So what else would you like to talk about? Because, this is your opportunity to tell your story the way you want it told. That's what I always try to tell my guests. And for the audience, it's for them to hear lots of different perspectives. Because like I said, now my world grows exponentially for every perspective that is shared with me.
I appreciate the question. Yeah, I think that I just want to reiterate that I really believe that in order to make a change, we have to start with the students, because students are the future.
Mm-hmm.
They are the future policy makers.
Mm-hmm.
So if we take the time to teach them and give them the necessary tools, they can do wonders. And I'll give an example. I taught a small group of students about accessibility differences. And we were making birthday cards for a friend that I know, because he wanted to have people that celebrate him. And it was so amazing to see the difference in the messages before we had the conversation and after we had the conversation. And it changed to, "You're awesome just the way you are, and we want to be your friend." And that's what I'm all about.
Yeah, that is amazing. So we've gotten a comment that you could probably see it, but I do want to put it up for everybody. This is from Miss Robin, who I believe you have now met. I think you might have done some of your research with her as well. And she says, "Amrutha, you are amazing. Love listening to you." And she had also posted that she was very excited when I said that you were going to be on this episode, and she was looking forward to listening. And so do you realize that you are an inspiration and that you are inspiring a whole generation behind you?
That means the world to me for an advocate of your experience to say that, and that really means the world to me.
Oh, well, I believe it. I mean, I'm so excited for the research that you have already done, because I don't know that too much has been done in what, looking at kids and asking them, "Do you want to know more?" I mean, that was such an awesome answer that, yeah, 100% of the kids said, "Yeah, we want to know more. We want to be their ally. We just don't know how." And it's something that I have been talking about a lot, probably in the last 6 months to a year, is that we do spend all this time with the child in the special education environment, teaching them how to interact in the general education environment, but we don't work on the general education kids. And I think I was on a podcast recently on how to teach anything, and they asked me the question, like, for even a coach or a dance instructor, not just in a school setting. And I said, allow the kids to ask the questions. Allow them to acknowledge that there is something different about another person, and allow them to say, "I recognize that difference. I don't understand it. Please give me information so I can understand." Because we just don't do that. And like I said, I think that's where that bias comes from, is that we don't talk about it, so it must be bad, or it's controversial, or it's something negative, whatever negative term. And we just have to get so much better. And I can proudly say that I did some of that in my teaching career, where I had students that did spend the majority of their day with me. It just turned out that way in all their meetings, that it was decided there were 5 of them, and we called them the Fab Five. But I set up a program where every day for 30 minutes, kids from the general education population would come in and just play games and dance and have fun and interact with the kiddos that weren't out with them all day long. And I had such a tremendous, it was a volunteer opportunity. I went from, like, the first year I started it to having maybe 10% of the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that volunteered to, by the 6th or 7th year, whatever the last year was that I did it, I had like a 99% volunteer rate because it was such a great experience for everybody. And people told me, I'm going to go into special education. I'm going to go into physical therapy. I'm going to, I want to do something where I can work with people who learn differently, which is how I've always described my students, is everybody can learn. How we get there might look different. And so I'm so excited to know that there is now research that says they want to know. It's not just kids in Southern Illinois, it's kids in North Carolina too, and probably all across the country.
So true, so true. And I love that program that you started. And I think facilitating similar opportunities for people to learn about this and to interact with people with accessibility differences, and also acknowledge that there may be times that they may need to learn something, and that's okay. I think that's very important to emphasize.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm very proud of that program. The superintendent told me, because I left that district, the students that were that intensive of needs left that district, and she told me that was the best program the school ever had. And to know all the programs that the school had and to be told that was very heartwarming. And still to this day, the students, whether they were in the general education population, will still ask me if they see me or they see the students that they had their buddy time with, which was what I called it, was buddy time. Mm-hmm. And they'll still reach out to them through social media or, if they happen to see them around town. Speaking of social media, you've grown up in the age of social media. Has that had any impact on you, positive or negative?
That's a very good question. I try to be very careful with social media because you don't know who's out there. Right. So I would say that within people that I know, I've had very positive interactions. And I've gotten very positive interactions from parents and teachers who follow what I do. I would say that, like, with some people, I've only had like a few negative interactions. Awesome. And I think because I take a little bit of a different approach to advocacy, and I identify differently, as I explained. And I think that overall it's been positive, and I hope to focus on those and just be myself.
Yeah. Well, yourself is amazing. So please continue to focus and be yourself. I do want to ask you one question about your future. Sure. What are you going to do in your future?
That's a great question. And I'm still trying to figure it out. But at UNC, there's this place called the Campus Y, which is a center for social innovation and social justice. And I have had the honor of being involved in a variety of initiatives in this organization, and I would love to mentor students, no matter what they want to do within social justice, whether it be special needs advocacy or, I don't know, women's rights. Anything they want to do. I would love to mentor them and really be that staff member who cares for them academically and on a personal level.
I think you would be an amazing person in that role, because you obviously care and you have empathy and you have the experiences of some of the struggles and overcoming those struggles and just wanting to make a change. And I so appreciate that about you. I don't always see that in people your age. And so that's part of why you're inspiring the next generation, is because you have that drive. You have that desire to, you see that there's something that needs to be better, and you're continuing to work to make it better. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for being on with me today. I very much enjoyed this conversation, just like when we had our conversation when it was for your research. You are such a delight to speak to. And again, I don't know many people that are as polite and courteous as you are, especially at your age. And I very much appreciated that about you. And I wish you all the best in your continuing education. And if there's something that I can do to help you, I'd be happy. I've never been to I have been to North Carolina, but it was a quick in and I was out the same day. I came in for an IEP meeting and then I flew out that night. So I didn't get a chance to do any kind of exploring. So if you want to convince somebody at UNC Chapel Hill to bring me on and have me be a speaker, I would love to do it. Spend a couple of days out there, get to spend some time with you personally. But in the meantime, good luck to you. And thank you so much for being on #NoLimits.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening to me today.
Absolutely. Tune in next week, guys. My brain just went blank on who. John O'Leary, I believe, is my guest next week. So tune in. He's got an amazing story. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hey, parents and teachers, are you tired of IEP meetings that feel like a battle? Let's put an end to the tension and create a collaborative, calm, and respectful environment together. Shelley Keno, your go-to IEP consultant, can transform your meetings into positive and productive experiences. With Shelley Keno, your child is her top priority, your voice is heard, and you become confident. Shelley Keno is making the world better for all, one IEP at a time. Visit www.shelleykeno.com for more information and set up your free 20-minute consultation today. That's shelleykeno.com, SHELLEYKENOW.